Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Joseph Brennan, and today I'm going to be giving my presentation on the AI race between the United States and China and what a Chinese victory would look like in this race. I'm using the terms race and victory somewhat abstractly, as this competition of sorts between the United States and China is not something that we can really see the end of. It's almost inconceivable because it's a constantly developing subject. But, anyways, moving on. So, to give some context to what I consider an underrated issue, almost everybody deals with the AI in their day-to-day lives through different things such as funny videos, deepfakes of celebrities and their likeness, or their music on social media, students cheating on homework, quick knowledge grabs, the concept of an existential threat through AI being used in like fictional media. It's used as a tech industry tool, and it's, as everybody knows, advertised all throughout the city. Um, but some of the things that a lot of people don't know about concerning AI are the competing global models, the forced reliance on artificial general intelligence, automated or unregulated weapon systems, as well as algorithmic censoring, or what I would call revisionist history. So, to give some brief history surrounding AI, I'm going to be focusing more on Chinese AI, but I am going to be doing a little bit of a comparison here between the United States and China for historical context. So in the United States, AI began at Dartmouth in 1956. It started with solving basic games and math problems and stuff like that. It lost funding twice in the 20th century as it was seen as kind of a gimmick that wasn't very profitable. But then it gained traction again in the early 2000s with deep learning algorithms breaking through. This led to the AGI branch off in 2012, eventually leading to companies like OpenAI, ChatGPT, perfect example. Um, in 2023, Biden handed off the risks of AI to seven different companies. This included OpenAI as well as Amazon. And the expenditure in this decade on AI is expected to reach in the trillions, as well as ever increasing involvement in infrastructure, military, and state intelligence. So now focusing more closely on Chinese AI. So Chinese AI started a little bit later than the United States. It began with the Chinese Association for Artificial Intelligence in 1981. Quickly after that, AI began to fuel Chinese automation in 1993 and expanded their infrastructure. AI first officially was mentioned in the 11th five-year plan in a government document for the first time, and then has been involved in every five-year plan since then. Um, Intensified focus on AI in China happened in the early mid 2010s. This is likely due to sanctions placed on China by the United States that led to them having to focus more domestically on technological production. This also had a hand in leading to Made in China 2025, which was a program in China that was created in 2015 to essentially steer China away from creating mass amounts of cheap electronics for the foreign market and shifting more towards finer, more higher quality electronics for their domestic use and market. AI is considered the spearhead of naval advancement in the Chinese military with stuff like drone tech as well as coordinated drone software more specifically. Further progress in economy integration and language development and algorithms is expected in this decade as well. Something to pay attention to with Chinese AI as well is that China has made great use of embodied AI, which is essentially the idea of putting artificial intelligence in machines and then using them in industry, such as machines on assembly lines, for example, with cars and solar and stuff like that. And this will play an important role later on in the presentation, the embodied AI aspect. So, comparing the AI race between the United States and China with foreign historical rivalries, it's unlike the space race, as the space race had an end goal and was conceivably less dangerous. It's unlike the nuclear arms race, as with the nuclear arms race, there was a greater immediate danger, as well as the fact that the nuclear arms race is kind of expected to maybe die down, but essentially will continue until all nukes like magically disappear, hopefully through some sort of treaty, or unfortunately, when someone uses a nuclear bomb, that would also be considered perhaps the end of the nuclear arms race. Um, This leads it to be kind of unlike most of what we've seen before. AI in both countries is growing exceptionally fast. There's also no conceivable end goal. I will pitch a number of different threats that could come out of China outpacing the United States, but these threats aren't even really an end goal of China surpassing us. It is just what could be seen in the near future, as the end of AI is kind of an inconceivable concept as it's still very much in its infancy. So, moving on to the first Chinese related threat to China outpacing the United States in I call it outsourcing. So, based on the Mercator Institute for Chinese Studies, China is the fourth largest arms exporter in the world. Beijing is not involved in the arms pacts that many other countries are involved in, such as the Weisinger Agreement, as well as the Missile Technology Control Regime. Very often, China does not consider the humanitarian issues involved in the countries that they're dealing with, such as giving weapons to Myanmar during their civil war, as well as supplying weapons to Pakistan, their biggest customer, during their development of Taliban training camps to help train Taliban fighters. With this in mind, it creates the perfect storm of China developing new technology, drone technology, for example, that they could then send out to foreign countries, which would potentially advance their military technology by essentially decades overnight and could pose a threat to allies abroad, as well as even could raise the chance of of an attack domestically on the United States. So moving on to the second point, I call industry dominance. So this is based on Tim Rutlig at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. So first, I would like to point at Huawei as an example in this. So Huawei is one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. It provides their services at a cheaper price than most, which has allowed for their success. It is the largest developer of 5G equipment. It has built 70% of all 5G equipment around the world. And even though it is not a state-sponsored entity, or in simpler terms, it's not owned by the Chinese Communist Party or the Chinese government, it is still considered a state champion and has very, very close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. There have been many allegations that Chinese intelligence has used Huawei to install backdoors for sabotage as well as espionage abroad. Um, so with this in mind, if we take a look at a company like Huawei and we apply it to a future scenario where if a company like Huawei that has been able to market themselves to almost all of South America, all of Europe, some of Africa, and most of Asia, if we were to take a company to have similar success coming out of China, but instead of telecommunications, it specialized in embodied AI and was able to be the leading AI software in European industry, or more specifically, NATO ally industry, such as assembly lines and the previous examples I gave, you would have NATO allied countries running their economies under the thumb of a Chinese software that, in the event of a crisis, could be turned on and off and could pose a real threat to the world economy, or more specifically, the countries that choose to obtain this software. Moving on to my third point and kind of jumping off of my previous point is Xi Jinping thought. So, Xi Jinping thought is essentially the philosophy of the leader of China, Xi Jinping, mixed with Chinese nationalism as well as Chinese Marxism combined to create kind of a mantra of how the people of China could conduct themselves. According to the South China Post, Xi Jinping thought has been included in the algorithms coming out of China. They're essentially being modeled after this philosophy, censoring Western knowledge on specific points, as well as filtering out unfavorable events. A good example would be Tiananmen Square. You wouldn't hear about that on a Xi Jinping AI algorithm. Um, so that kind of creates the danger of, if these algorithms are able to gain preference in European companies across the world, similar to the former scenario I pitched with expanding at the same rate as Huawei, you would have countries using basically an information platform that is falsified in real time and does not provide proper, true information, similar to, as the visual I put, 1984, where events are being modified based on the preference of the state, or in this case, the Chinese Communist Party. So, with these threats being pitched, coming to my solutions and my conclusion, I think that the first solution to a problem like this would be to strengthen relations with foreign countries. Um, and it is fundamental to stopping growing authoritarianism in the same context. Expanding programs similar to the Seoul Statement of Intent toward International Cooperation on AI Safety Science. This is an agreement that came out of South Korea to essentially keep South Korea's and the United States' goals with AI similar. Um, Expanding programs like that would be crucial. Increasing AI safety across the board is another big factor. The godfathers of AI, Geoffrey Hinton and Yoshio Burgo, both agree that companies and countries need a regulatory response wherein if a crisis were to take place, there would be something of a plan of action. They have said that a crisis in the context of AI is not theoretical, but is almost certainly going to happen, which makes it even more important to have these kind of bumpers in place, if you will. And then the third and final point, which is my point, is negotiate sanctions with allies against Chinese influenced software to essentially prevent to essentially prevent countries as well as companies in Europe and our other allies abroad from adopting Chinese software, which would then make them vulnerable to economic instability, and other sorts of crisis. So that is my presentation. Thank you so much.